This video will help you understand how the IBM Employee Stock Purchase Plan works so you can make a more informed decision if you want to get involved. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Dime. I'm a financial planner out of Edmonds, Washington, and I specialize in working with folks to and through retirement. The goal for this video today is to cover some of the highlights that go into the IBM Employee Stock Purchase Plan. Also, from experience in sharing Zoom calls with current clients, the computer share resources don't seem to perfectly lay out all the pros and cons to getting involved in the Employee Stock Purchase Plan. So I'm hoping this serves as a helpful way of understanding discounts and offering periods, etc. So let's jump in. For more general information on employee stock purchase plans and the associated tax ramifications that might apply to plans other than just the IBM Employee Stock Purchase Plan, I'll link below to my two previous videos that came out a couple years ago that sort of break down some of the nuances in the event you want to dive in deeper. In addition, it might help paint some context when we use some terminology moving forward in this video. Fundamentally, an employee stock purchase plan permits an employee of a particular employer who offers stock to purchase that stock at a discount compared to the masses. For example, if your employer offers a 10% discount on your stock, and let's say that stock is trading at $100 a share, if we both invest $100, if you're an employee that has access to an employee stock purchase plan with a 10% discount, you'll be able to buy 1.1 shares of that stock, whereas I'll only be able to buy 1 share of that stock. We both have $100, but you end up with more shares. Dollar for dollar, that means when we go to actually sell our shares, you'll have more money available to you because of the employer-sponsored discount that they gave you. So diving into the IBM Employee Stock Purchase Plan specifically, at a high level, IBM offers a 15% discount on purchasing stock. And that's actually pretty good compared to what I've mostly experienced out there in the Employee Stock Purchase Plan realm. There's a max contribution to the plan of between 1 to 10% of eligible compensation, but there's also an IRS maximum of $25,000. So for example, if you make $100,000, then your maximum contribution to the plan would be $10,000. Whereas if you make $300,000, your maximum contribution to the plan would be limited to $25,000. You wouldn't be able to put in 10% of $300,000, which is $30,000. You'd be capped at $25,000. In addition, IBM offers what's called a semi-annual offering period. And basically what that means is you have 2 chances to get into this plan, and they are 6-month vesting cycles, if you will. From the day you start making contributions to the plan, fast forward 6 months, then you'll have access to the stock. And obviously if it's semi-annual, that happens twice in a year. Those semi-annual offering periods are on January 1 as well as July 1. So kind of simple to understand, the first and then after the 6th month of the year. Therefore, the enrollment window, or when you can tell HR you want to be a part of this plan, is going to be available 2 to 3 weeks out from the beginning of January 1, so say like beginning of December timeframe, and before July 1, which would be, I don't know, early June. Now, historically, IBM has done quarterly offering periods, whereby as opposed to every 6 months, it was every 4 months. But that stopped back in like 2022. So moving forward, barring any unique changes, which you'll probably know faster than me, the offering period is every 6 months. So to clarify once more, the offering period is when you start making contributions into the plan. At the end of the offering period, IBM purchases the stock. You get that stock price, and then there is a discount applied, which we'll touch on more in a second. Therefore, your enrollment window, or when you can say, I want to be a part of this plan, will open up a few weeks before the beginning of an offering period. In the offering period, think of that as like a roller coaster. Once you start, you can't stop. Now, unique to the IBM plan, however, is you can hop off the roller coaster. So let's say we're 3 or 4 months into an offering period and you decide you no longer want to make payroll contributions to the IBM Employee Stock Purchase Plan. You can raise your hand and tell HR you want out, and they'll opt you out of the Employee Stock Purchase Plan. That's actually kind of unique. I haven't seen that a lot when reading through other summary plan descriptions. So I guess there's a little bit of saving grace if you change your mind. You don't have to wait for the completion of that 6-month cycle. This is also helpful because as opposed to like quarterly employee stock purchase plans, since IBM's is semi-annual, that's a bit more of a long-term decision on liquidity. Meaning if you decide, hey, I want to put in 10% of my compensation, and then you have some liquidity concerns, if you didn't have the ability to get out of the plan, then you'd be locked into making those contributions for the remainder of that 6-month period. So we have our enrollment windows, which is a couple weeks before the beginning of an offering period. You've got your 6-month offering period beginning in January and July. And then you have your purchase date. And the purchase date is the last day of said offering period, which I guess would be July 31st and December 31st. Now, of course, if those are weekends, then you're going to plus or minus a day because you can't transact on a weekend by purchasing company stock. But to keep it very simple, roughly July 31st and December 31st, whatever the stock price is on that day, that's the stock price that IBM is going to buy the stock for you and then apply a discount to it. Now, you might be familiar with what's called a look-back provision, and that's where the company looks at the offering period and says which stock price was lower, the stock price at the beginning of the offering period or the end. And then they give you that stock price, whichever one's lower. Unfortunately, there's no look-back provision with the IBM Employee Stock Purchase Plan as of the time of this video. So the way that it works is, since there's no look-back, it's whatever the stock price is at the end of the offering period, IBM buys the stock for that amount and then applies your discount to that. Now, obviously, if they did offer a look-back provision, that means for the same dollar amount of contributions, you'd be able to buy more shares because almost by definition, the stock price is either lower at the beginning or the end of the offering period, and you get the better of those two prices, meaning the lower. Therefore, your dollar stretches further and buys more shares. Now, again, IBM doesn't offer this, so you're kind of SOL with regard to that feature. Now, presumably your goal is to make money with this employee stock purchase plan, and generally that means selling out of the stock at an advantageous time. I guess theoretically you could make money by buying a bunch of discounted stock and then dying with hordes of IBM stock, but I think most people would prefer to use that stock for either retirement income or diversification towards other investments, whatever. So let's fast forward and say you do want to sell out of this stock either at the end of the offering period or at some undetermined time in the future. There's going to be two types of dispositions that you're going to read about online or watch in my previous videos. There's either going to be a qualifying disposition or a disqualifying disposition. If you're familiar with how these two things work, go ahead and skip ahead. I'll timestamp below to how this affects the IBM plan. These two types of dispositions are not unique to the IBM plan. Every single employee stock purchase plan falls into either qualifying or disqualifying disposition rules. Now, a qualifying disposition, that's where you hold the stock in your possession for at least 1 year. So after that 6-month offering period, you wait another year and you hold the stock. In addition, you have to hold the stock for 2 years since the beginning of the offering period. So if the beginning of the offering period was January and you get access to the shares on July 1, for example, you need to hold on to those shares for 1 year and another 6 months to get to that full 2-year holding period that you have to meet to obtain a qualifying disposition label. Now, a disqualifying disposition is whenever you sell the shares, but you didn't meet the aforementioned two other definitions for holding period requirements. Now, why does this matter? Generally, it matters because the goal with these types of stock plans is to not pay more in taxes than you have to. And depending on which disposition you dispose of your shares at, that will dictate the underlying tax consequences of the sale. Let's break down the differences between these two possible dispositions. Well, number one, regardless of the disposition type, the dollar value of the discount that IBM provides for you, that 15%, that will be considered ordinary income to you and therefore ordinary income taxable whenever you sell the shares. And there's unfortunately nothing you can do about that. So whether it's qualifying or disqualifying, the discount is considered ordinary income. If you meet the rules for a qualifying disposition, that means you held the stock for at least a year after it landed in your account, which means you get to treat the gain of those shares since the day it landed in your account to whenever you sold it, you get to treat all of that as long-term capital gains. Remember, the purchase price minus the discount, that was already taxed as ordinary income as part of this transaction. So now we just have to figure out whether or not you're going to pay short-term or long-term capital gains on the gain since the day that the stock landed in your possession. With a disqualifying disposition, however, let's say you sell the stock 6 months after it landed in your account. Well, unfortunately, that didn't meet the rules for long-term capital gains treatment, which is holding the stock for at least a year. And you now have to pay short-term capital gains on whatever the difference is between the sale price and the purchase price whenever the stock was purchased. Short-term capital gains is taxed in 2024 at your ordinary income tax rate. So that basically means you get to pay ordinary income taxes on the difference between the sale price of the stock and the purchase price minus the discount. That whole amount would be considered basically ordinary income tax to you, which generally is very unfavorably taxed compared to long-term capital gains rates, which is around 15 to 20% for most folks. Now, even if you don't wait 2 years since the beginning of the offering period, aka you transact a disqualifying disposition, but you hold the stock for at least a year after it landed in your account. So that'd be 1.5 years for the IBM plan since the beginning of the offering period. If you held the stock in your possession for at least a year, you achieved long-term capital gains tax rates on the gain. Even though it's a disqualifying disposition, for the IBM plan, they're actually taxed the exact same. So whether you meet the rules for a qualifying disposition or you don't meet the rules for a qualifying disposition but you hold the stock for at least a year, both scenarios result in the exact same tax consequences. Namely, ordinary income taxes on the discount and then long-term capital gains on the difference between the sale price and the purchase price. The reason why there's a differentiation between qualifying and disqualifying dispositions for other employee stock purchase plans is because when a look-back provision is applied, in order to get that look-backed discount, if you will, counted as long-term capital gains, you have to meet the qualifying disposition rules. But since there's no look-back with the IBM plan, you don't need to wait 2 years since the beginning of the offering period to still achieve maximum tax efficiency, if you will, on selling shares from this account. Now, of course, you could sell the stock immediately after it lands in your account and theoretically owe no short-term capital gains because there wasn't enough time for capital gains to occur. That's one way to do it and achieve, maximum tax efficiency. But if you tell yourself, I'm gonna hold on to this stock for a certain amount of time, at least waiting a year, even though it'd be considered a disqualifying disposition, would still permit you to achieve long-term capital gains rates on the difference between the sale price and the purchase price. So in my opinion, there's no real reason other than stock speculation to wait 2 years since the beginning of the offering period. There's no real reason to try to go for a qualifying disposition as opposed to just holding the stock for at least a year, because in my opinion, that's kind of all that matters is whether you're gonna pay short-term or long-term capital gains tax on the capital gain. So what's my recommendation for what to do with this plan? Well, for those of you who care, of course, it's always going to come down to your unique circumstances and situation, right? Classic financial advisor disclaimer. In reality, a lot of clients I find use these plans successfully when they have a diversification plan in mind, and generally we're not using these plans just to accumulate more company stock. That's a lot of risk, not only because it'd be a large part of their overall investment portfolio, but then also generally their compensation is tied to that company. Then they also have now stock accounts that are tied to that company's performance, and it's just a lot of risk. So a lot of times we will ideally just use these plans to leverage that discount, sell the stock as soon as it lands in their account, and then diversify that elsewhere. In a perfect world, I'd say that's what most people should probably do with these plans. Now, while on Excel and in financial planning software, the math will always show that an employee stock purchase plan and diversifying immediately looks great on paper. In reality, I think people get far too busy with other things, don't follow through on selling the stock objectively because maybe the stock's doing well, so we want to keep it just for a little bit longer. And then we run into short-term capital gains problems, so then we wait a little bit longer. And in reality, unless you're super disciplined and you're going to dogmatically sell out of the stock every single time it vests, I don't know if it's the best strategy to always get involved in plans like this. Now, of course, there's always the liquidity concerns, right? You're going to be out of money because you're investing in another investment plan during the offering period. But odds are I'd recommend you do the liquidity analysis to know if you're going to need this money in the next 6 months. That would dictate whether you should even entertain getting into the employee stock purchase plan. So I'd say if you're super disciplined, absolutely rock and roll, take advantage of the discount. If you're not super disciplined or you just have other things that take up a lot more time in your day, it might just make more sense just to commit to dollar cost averaging on a monthly basis into your investment account as opposed to getting enrolled in the employee stock purchase plan and then selling out of the stock immediately when it vests. So from a calls to action standpoint, number one, if you're at IBM, I'd see if you're already enrolled in the plan. And if you are, make sure you're either maximizing the plan or you come up with a diversification plan when the stock vests. You don't have to dogmatically diversify as soon as you have access to the stock, but I would highlight a time at which you're going to get out of the stock, maybe a particular price, or as soon as you've eclipsed that 1 year long-term capital gains rate territory. If you're not enrolled in the plan, I might go do some financial planning and figure out if it is a good idea for you to get involved. And if so, see when your next enrollment period is going to be and then hop into the next offering period. But as always, know thyself. If you're not going to objectively sell out of the stock when you predetermine you're going to do so, then I would just recommend saving monthly into some investment account elsewhere and forgetting about the employee stock purchase plan. Hope that helps. If you have further questions, drop them in the comments below or get in touch on the website. We'll help you get squared away. Have an awesome rest of your day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.